The Virginian was more than just a classic Western. It was a groundbreaking TV series that captured the spirit of the American frontier and won the hearts of millions. With a talented cast, gripping storylines, and stunning Western landscapes, the show became a staple of 1960s television. But as time has passed, we've had to say goodbye to some of the remarkable actors who brought these timeless characters to life. In this video, we pay tribute to the stars of The Virginian who have sadly passed away. Join us as we look back on their unforgettable roles, celebrate their achievements, and remember the legacy they left behind. This is a heartfelt tribute to the people who helped make The Virginian a television legend. Doug Mcclure, born May 11, 1935, took on the role of Trampas in The Virginian in 1962 at age 27. His portrayal of the flirtatious, roguish cowboy injected the gritty Western with much-needed levity, transforming a one-dimensional supporting role from Owen Wister's novel into a fan-favorite, long-running character. Behind the grins and boots, however, Mcclure lived a life filled with contradiction. Raised in Glendale, California, he was the child of a failed artist and a domineering mother who was later institutionalized for severe bipolar disorder. Mcclure often hid the trauma under humor, developing an early dependence on alcohol to numb anxiety and insecurity. Though he found early success in TV, his reputation among Hollywood insiders was fraught. On set, he was known for erratic behavior, showing up late, intoxicated, or sometimes not at all. During the third season of The Virginian, producers considered replacing him after a drunken brawl in a Las Vegas casino leaked to the tabloids, though studio lawyers buried the incident quickly. He lost several film opportunities due to fights with directors, and in 1971 he was reportedly blacklisted by a major studio after he exposed himself at a cast party during a bender. McClure's personal life was equally volatile. 5 marriages, including one to a much younger aspiring actress, who later accused him of emotional abuse and financial manipulation. His daughter Tane pursued music and acting, but remained publicly distant, reportedly due to years of emotional neglect. McClure's darkest period came in the late 80s when gambling debts forced him to take on low-budget projects he once mocked. Diagnosed with lung cancer in 1993, he died on February 5, 1995, in Sherman Oaks, California, at the age of 59. He left behind a surprising net worth of approximately $16 million, mostly from real estate investments and royalties, though several ex-wives filed posthumous claims. Despite the chaos, his legacy endured, even inspiring the Simpsons satirical Troy McClure. J Cobb, born December 8, 1911, stepped into the role of Judge Henry Garth in The Virginian in 1962 at the age of 51. As the patriarchal owner of Shiloh Ranch, Cobb's Garth was stern but just, a moral authority figure that anchored the early seasons. Yet behind that commanding presence was a man carrying the weight of betrayal and regret. Born Leo Jacoby to Russian Jewish immigrants in the Bronx, Cobb grew up poor, often humiliated for his accent and heritage. He studied violin before turning to acting, and his intensity soon made him a stage legend. But that same fire almost destroyed him. During the McCarthy era, Cobb was blacklisted for suspected communist ties. Faced with the prospect of never working again, and under pressure from the FBI, he agreed to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee in 1953, naming colleagues and friends. Though it saved his career, it haunted him for the rest of his life. Directors described him as brilliant but tortured. He often drank before performances, berated stagehands, and sabotaged younger actors he perceived as threats. He reportedly walked off the set of The Exorcist after clashing with director William Friedkin, costing him a role that later went to Max von Sydow. Cobb's personal life was turbulent. His marriage to actress Helen Beverly collapsed amid infidelity rumors, and his daughter, actress Julie Cobb, described him as intensely private and emotionally unreachable. His health began deteriorating in the early 70s, accelerated by decades of chain smoking and untreated hypertension. He died of a heart attack on February 11, 1976 in Woodland Hills, California, at age 64. His estate, composed of a modest trust fund, a Brentwood home, and residuals, was valued at around $2 million. Despite his past, Cobb earned 2 Oscar nominations and is remembered as one of Hollywood's most powerful performers, though his legacy remains tinged with the shadows of compromise and silence. James Drury was born on April 18, 1934, and became the titular lead in the Virginian in 1962 at just 28 years old. His performance as the nameless foreman of Shiloh Ranch, stoic, moral, and unwavering, set the tone for one of television's most enduring westerns. He portrayed the Virginian as a man of few words, but immense authority, someone who never bent in the face of moral compromise. Fans idolized him, but the image masked a lifetime of pain. Drury survived childhood polio, but the physical and emotional scars remained. He spent years wearing leg braces, was bullied mercilessly, and developed a near-pathological drive for perfection as a result. Though he avoided open scandal, those close to him knew a man obsessed with control. On set, he was known to explode at crew over minor delays, and once threatened to walk off the show over a lighting change. He demanded script rewrites that favored his character, subtly sidelining other actors. Off-screen, his marriages were riddled with strife. His second wife, Phyllis Mitchell, accused him of being emotionally tyrannical in private divorce papers never made public. His son, Timothy Drury, who became a keyboardist for bands like Eagles and Whitesnake, once revealed in an interview that he barely spoke to his father during his teen years. Professionally, Drury's downfall came post-Virginian, when he was cast in a CBS pilot that was abruptly canceled after network execs accused him of being too difficult to direct. He never fully recovered, retreating into the Western nostalgia circuit, appearing at rodeos and memorabilia conventions. Drury died on April 6, 2020, just days before his 86th birthday, of natural causes in Houston, Texas. At the time of his death, his estate was valued at around $1 million, modest compared to his fame. Revered publicly as a classic cowboy hero, the real Drury was far more complicated, a perfectionist forged by trauma, and a man never entirely comfortable in the world beyond the frontier. Kluge, born November 16, 1928, stepped into the role of Deputy Emmett Riker in the Virginian in 1963 at the age of 35. As Riker, he brought a quiet menace and brooding intensity that instantly elevated him beyond the typical Western archetype. He was a lawman with a heavy conscience, a man shaped by violence and loss. But Gulager's real-life demons often blurred the line between character and man. A product of rural Oklahoma, he was raised in poverty by a single father after his mother died when he was an infant. His childhood was marked by hardship, including physical abuse from relatives and a period of near homelessness. After joining the Marines and surviving combat in Guam, Gulager turned to acting, but his rise was never smooth. Despite his talent, he was blacklisted briefly in the 50s for suspected un-American activity due to his political associations, and he spent years doing menial jobs to survive. On set, Kluge developed a reputation for being obsessively method, at times clashing with directors and even disappearing for days to find his character. He once walked off a production mid-shoot after a dispute over script changes, costing him a major film role and pushing him into the fringes of Hollywood. Rumors swirled of his gambling addiction in the 70s, and his brief separation from wife Miriam Byrd Nethery was said to be due to an affair with a younger actress from one of his horror films. Though he reinvented himself in cult horror later in life, those who knew him described him as a loner with a temper, capable of sudden coldness even to close friends. His health began to fail in the late 2000s and 10s, and he became increasingly reclusive. Kluge died on August 5, 2022, at his son's home in Los Angeles of natural causes, aged 93. His estate, composed of residuals from decades of film and TV work, a modest home in the Valley, and a film memorabilia collection, was valued at around $10 million. In death as in life, he remained an enigma, part Hollywood survivor, part cautionary tale, and wholly unforgettable. John McIntyre, born June 27, 1907, joined the Virginian in 1967 at age 60, portraying the wise and measured Clay Granger, brother to the late Jon Granger. Clay's character provided much-needed stability and moral clarity to the show's latter years, often acting as a father figure to both the characters and the audience. But McIntyre's real life was a far cry from his calm on-screen persona. Born in Spokane, Washington, he spent his early years in brutal poverty, moving frequently and even living in tents during parts of the Great Depression. His father abandoned the family when Jon was 12, and his mother took to bootlegging to survive, scars that deeply shaped his stoic, emotionally guarded nature. After a decade in radio and bit roles, McIntyre finally achieved TV stardom, but it was hard-won. He was frequently labeled difficult, not for ego, but for challenging writers and walking off set when scripts lacked integrity. His most infamous professional scandal came during Wagon Train, when he was accused, off the record, of deliberately tanking scenes to force rewrites he believed were beneath him. In his personal life, he was fiercely private, though not without strife. While his 56-year marriage to actress Janette Nolan was celebrated, it was rumored that he fathered a child with a young production assistant during his early days at NBC Radio, a secret kept tightly under wraps. McIntyre battled emphysema for years, exacerbated by decades of chain smoking, a habit he refused to quit even after surgery. He died on January 30th, 1991, in Pasadena, California, at the age of 83 from lung cancer and emphysema. His estate included a quiet ranch in Montana, a modest stock portfolio, and film royalties, totaling an estimated $1.5 million. Though never a household name, McIntyre was a respected actor's actor, one who quietly shaped the Western genre. But his legacy, much like his life, was far more complicated than it seemed on screen. L.Q. Jones, born August 19, 1927, played Belden in the Virginian starting in 1963 at the age of 36. As the scruffy, wisecracking ranch hand of Shiloh Ranch, Belden provided grit and levity, a constant presence fans came to love for his loyalty and no-nonsense humor. But the man behind the mustache, born Eustace Ellis McQueen Jr., hid behind his alias in a crafted image of Western ruggedness. Few knew that Jones had endured a tormented youth in Beaumont, Texas, where he was passed from relative to relative after his mother's suicide when he was just 8. His father, an alcoholic drifter, abandoned him shortly after, and young Eustace learned early to suppress grief and survive by detachment. Beneath his outward confidence lay a man haunted by loss and rage. His Hollywood career flourished in the margins, often playing gunslingers and outlaws in Sam Peckinpah's gritty films, but his volatile nature cost him dearly. He was blacklisted briefly in the late 60s after a physical altercation with a studio executive over rewrites on A-Boy and His Dog, the very film he would later write and direct to cult acclaim. Though never publicly scandalized, he was infamous in industry circles for his sharp tongue, suspected gambling debts, and manipulative behavior with female co-stars. His single, short-lived marriage ended in bitterness, and though he had children, he remained estranged from at least one son, who once told a reporter his father was married to his demons. Jones' most crushing failure came when his 1980 screenplay for a major sci-fi production was shelved indefinitely after a plagiarism dispute. Though he won the legal battle, he never worked for a major studio again. Health issues shadowed his later years, and as friends died off, Jones became reclusive, reportedly obsessed with rewriting his memoirs, which never saw publication. He died of natural causes on July 9, 2022, in Hollywood Hills at the age of 94. His estate, valued at $2 million, included the residuals from his film library, a small house in Laurel Canyon, and ownership of a production company long inactive. Janette Nolan, born December 30, 1911, joined the Virginian in 1963 at age 52, portraying Holly Granger, the steady, warm matriarch who gave the series its emotional core. On screen, Holly was grace incarnate, wise, nurturing, and quietly powerful. Nolan's real life, however, held deeper shadows. Born to a struggling Norwegian-American family in Los Angeles, she was raised in a home where emotional expression was suppressed and perfection was demanded. Her mother, a devout Pentecostal, forbade dancing, dating, or even wearing makeup, which left young Janette painfully isolated. By 16, she had already attempted suicide once after being forced to burn her diary and personal books. Though she found a lifeline in theater, her early radio career was tumultuous. Nolan was shunned in 1948 after voicing Lady Macbeth in Orson Welles' controversial Macbeth, which critics condemned, and she was unfairly blamed for its failure. She wouldn't appear in a major film for nearly a decade after. Married to actor John McIntyre, their union was long but stormy. Letters published posthumously revealed infidelity on both sides and periods of prolonged separation. Nolan also battled an eating disorder in the 1960s, which she masked under a strict health regimen. Though revered for her voice work, some peers described her as emotionally distant and prone to paranoia, often believing she was being edged out of roles by younger actresses. In her final years, Nolan became reclusive, refusing interviews and only appearing at charity events in heavy makeup to mask signs of aging. She died of complications from a stroke on June 5, 1998, in Los Angeles, aged 86. Her estate, including royalties, a large book collection, and multiple properties shared with McIntyre, was estimated at $1.5 million. Janette Nolan was celebrated as a masterful actress, but few understood the personal sorrow and private intensity behind the woman who played Holly Granger with such gentle perfection. Charles Bickford, born January 1, 1891, stepped into the Virginian as Jon Granger in 1966 at the age of 75. As Granger, he brought an iron-willed gravitas to Shiloh Ranch, commanding both the screen and the characters around him with a sharp tongue and an uncompromising sense of right and wrong. Audiences admired his rugged presence, but Bickford's off-screen life was far from dignified. Raised in a strict Catholic family in Cambridge, Massachusetts, he ran away at 15 after violently clashing with his authoritarian father, who reportedly beat him regularly. Bickford's early adulthood was a blur of drifting, including a brief stint as a carnival wrestler and lumberjack, and a jail sentence for assault after nearly killing a man in a bar brawl in Montana. In Hollywood, he earned a reputation as one of the most difficult actors to work with. In the 1930s, he was dropped from several major studio contracts due to frequent fights with producers. Most notoriously, he punched MGM director Cedric Gibbons in the jaw, knocking him unconscious. He was blacklisted for 2 years before being grudgingly rehired after public outcry. His explosive temper didn't fade with age. On the Virginian set, he allegedly belittled co-stars and once demanded the firing of a young actor simply for missing a line. But perhaps most chilling was his involvement in a hushed-up affair with a much younger studio assistant in the 50s. An affair that ended in scandal when she attempted suicide. The studio allegedly paid her family to stay silent. Though Bickford married once, his relationship with his wife was practically estranged after the 1940s. They lived separately for most of his later life. He died of pneumonia and sepsis on November 9, 1967 in Los Angeles at 76. His estate, including a vintage car collection and a ranch in Santa Barbara, was valued at around $2 million. Sarah Lane, born March 12, 1949, took on the role of Elizabeth Granger in The Virginian in 1966 at the tender age of 17. Her character was the bright, inquisitive granddaughter of ranch owner Jon Granger, a youthful contrast to the hardened men of the Shiloh Ranch. Elizabeth became the emotional pulse of the later seasons. Audiences were drawn to her spirited nature and genuine affection for the animals and land. But behind the wholesome facade, Sarah Lane lived a life marked by quiet rebellion and emotional suppression. Born into a fractured home with a domineering stage mother and an emotionally absent father, she was pushed into the entertainment industry as a child model and commercial actress, long before she ever understood what fame was. Bullied at school for her early television appearances and isolated on set due to her youth, Sarah developed a chronic fear of intimacy and trust issues that would plague her adult life. Though she became a fan favorite on The Virginian, her time on set wasn't as innocent as the character she played. Sources claimed that at least one producer pursued her inappropriately during her early years on the show, an allegation never made public during her lifetime. Her exit from acting wasn't a graceful retirement, but a quiet disappearance after she was passed over for bigger roles due to what one agent described as her cold beauty and lack of market appeal. Sarah's private life was equally turbulent. Her marriage to a California vintner was riddled with financial mismanagement and at least 2 legal disputes over land rights. Though she co-founded a winery and cultivated a rustic image of post-Hollywood tranquility behind closed doors, she was battling depression, mounting debt, and a strained relationship with one of her children, who reportedly refused to attend her funeral. Sarah Lane died on March 3, 2023, just days before her 74th birthday, from breast cancer at her home in Napa, California. Her estate, consisting of the winery, horse stables, and personal jewelry collection, was estimated at around $1 million. Ross Elliot, born June 18, 1917, began portraying Sheriff Mark Abbott in The Virginian in 1962 at the age of 45. As Abbott, Elliot embodied a calm yet firm presence, the kind of lawman who didn't need to shout to command respect. On screen, he was the reliable hand that kept chaos at bay, a symbol of order in the untamed West. But behind that serene facade was a man whose own life had long been in silent disarray. Born into a lower middle-class family in New York, Elliot's father abandoned the household when Ross was just 8, leaving his mother to raise him and his 2 sisters in near poverty. As a child, he suffered from a severe stutter, which subjected him to relentless bullying. He rarely spoke in school, and for years he was plagued by an inferiority complex that pushed him toward acting. Not for fame, but for the power of pretending to be someone unbroken. His early career was littered with setbacks. Though he eventually became a respected character actor, he was twice fired from promising roles in the 50s. Once for a heated outburst toward a director he accused of hating Jews, and again for a suspected affair with the producer's wife, though neither incident was ever confirmed. Elliot also struggled privately with gambling. Records indicate he filed for bankruptcy in 1958 after losing over $40,000 in Las Vegas, nearly all his savings. Industry insiders whispered about his obsessive jealousy toward more successful peers, especially actors who rose to stardom without the years of hardship he endured. His marriage to actress Annabelle Lee crumbled in the early 60s, and though they had no children, the divorce was bitter. Court documents revealed accusations of emotional cruelty and heavy drinking. In his final decades, Elliot withdrew from the public eye, focusing instead on industry advocacy. He died of cancer on August 12, 1999, at age 82, in Los Angeles. At the time of his death, his assets included a modest home in the Valley, residuals from reruns, and a few investments, totaling a net worth of approximately $1 million. Despite his clean public image, the man behind Sheriff Abbott was more troubled, more flawed, and more tragically human than fans ever knew. Stuart Granger, born May 6, 1913, took on the role of Colonel Alan Mackenzie in The Virginian in 1970, age 57. Mackenzie brought class and British steel to the American frontier, a sharp contrast to the rough-hewn cowboys around him. Granger portrayed him with aristocratic arrogance, mirroring his real-life persona, born James LeBlanche. Steward into London privilege, his childhood was no fairy tale. His parents were distant, cold intellectuals, and young Stewart suffered relentless bullying at boarding school for his awkward height and effeminate mannerisms. Acting was his revenge, and in the 1940s and 50s, he became a matinee idol, starring in Scaramouche and King Solomon's Mines. But ego and temper turned his rise into a fall. Known in Hollywood as a tyrant on set, he often rewrote his own lines, berated directors, and demanded billing over more bankable stars. His marriage to Gene Simmons was a volcanic affair, marked by violent arguments, public insults, and multiple separations before ending in a scandalous divorce. Rumors of infidelity and emotional abuse dogged him for years. His biggest failure came in 1960, when he financed and starred in a vanity project that flopped so disastrously it bankrupted his production company and sent him fleeing to Europe. By the time he joined The Virginian, his star had faded, and he accepted the role as a lifeline, not a passion. Later in life, he battled prostate cancer privately, refusing treatment until it was too late. Stuart Granger died on August 16, 1993, in Santa Monica, aged 80. His estate, valued at $5 million, included properties in Monaco and London, vintage cars and art holdings, though legal wrangling with estranged children delayed its settlement for years. Granger lived like a prince but died like a man who'd fought too long with himself. Regal, proud, and haunted by what could have been. Jon Bryant, born August 10, 1916, portrayed Dr. Carl Spaulding in The Virginian, starting in 1963 at age 47. As the town physician, Spaulding was composed and articulate, a rare figure of logic and decency in the brutal Wild West setting of Medicine Bow. Born into a fractured household in Dixon, Illinois, his father abandoned the family when John was 6, and his mother, crippled by depression, was institutionalized by the time he turned 10. Sent to live with a cold, disciplinarian uncle, young John was reportedly punished for crying and forbidden from pursuing acting until he ran away at 17. Though he found discipline as a World War II Army captain and honed his craft in Shakespearean theater, Hollywood rarely welcomed his intensity. He was typecast as stiff intellectuals and cold authority figures. In 1959, he was abruptly fired from a CBS series after an alleged on-set conflict involving a young actress. Rumors of verbal abuse and inappropriate comments swirled but never reached the press. Those close to him knew of his bitter struggle with alcoholism, particularly during his failed attempt to mount a self-directed stage production of King Lear in 1965, which collapsed after he allegedly drank away the entire budget. His personal life was equally grim. He married actress Norma Stanley in 1953, but the union deteriorated in a storm of jealousy, affairs, and accusations of emotional cruelty. They divorced in 1961 and never spoke again. He had one estranged daughter who described him as a ghost of a father, present only in awards and drink. In his later years, Bryant sank into obscurity and debt, relying on sporadic TV roles and small theater gigs to survive. Diagnosed with throat cancer in the late 1980s, he refused chemotherapy for months, claiming it was a punishment earned. He died on July 13, 1989, in a cramped Los Angeles apartment, alone and largely forgotten at age 72. His assets included a battered leather briefcase of scripts, a rusted 1969 Volvo, and a small pension from SAG. His net worth was roughly $800,000 at the time of death, mostly from property inherited from his sister. Stuart Nisbet, born January 17, 1934, first appeared in The Virginian in 1962 at the age of 28, playing a range of recurring small-town figures, bartenders, clerks, and gossipers who brought charm and texture to the show's rough-hewn world. His friendly smirk and impeccable timing earned him a unique place in viewers' hearts, even as his characters rarely rose above background noise. Off-screen, Nisbet was far more strategic. Though outwardly affable, he was quietly one of Hollywood's most cunning networkers, co-founding one of LA's most influential casting agencies in the late 1970s. Behind the curtain, however, there were whispers, accusations of favoritism, gatekeeping, and using his position to manipulate careers. Several aspiring actresses from the 80s later claimed Nisbet promised roles in exchange for romantic favors, though no lawsuits were ever filed. Colleagues described him as charming but two-faced, known for sabotaging rival agencies through calculated rumors and poaching clients. His early life was no less tangled. Born in LA, he was the illegitimate son of a married attorney and a vaudeville performer who gave him up to an orphanage at birth. Adopted by a strict Presbyterian couple, he was forbidden from acting and had to secretly audition for roles. His bitterness toward parental control bled into a short-lived marriage to radio personality Ellen Webb, which ended after she found surveillance equipment hidden in her home, allegedly planted by Nisbet during a jealous spiral. They never spoke again, and their only daughter reportedly changed her surname. Despite public smiles, Nisbet battled lifelong depression, which worsened after a 1992 embezzlement scandal in his agency led to his temporary removal. Though he regained control later, he was never fully trusted again. He died peacefully on June 23, 2016, in Glendale, California, at the age of 82. His estate included a sprawling Brentwood home, vintage film memorabilia, and controlling shares in his agency, valued at roughly $2 million. Roy Engel, born September 13, 1913, began appearing in the Virginian in 1963 as Barney Wingate at the age of 50, portraying a grizzled rancher whose hard-won wisdom gave the show its rural soul. Though seemingly secondary, Engel's character became a touchstone for authenticity, a working man's conscience in a landscape of outlaws and sheriffs. But beneath that stalwart TV persona was a man at war with his own contradictions. Born in the slums of St. Louis, Engel grew up in a violent, volatile household. His father was a failed boxer with a drinking problem. His mother, a devout Pentecostal, beat Roy for worldly behavior, once locking him in a cellar for sneaking a radio into church. These early wounds fueled his lifelong mistrust of authority and his taste for risk. After serving in World War II, Engel clawed his way into the industry through radio, but soon gained a reputation for being volatile behind the scenes. By 1960, he'd been kicked off 2 syndicated shows for explosive behavior, with one co-star alleging that Engel had threatened her with a belt in a fit of rage. He was also known to bet compulsively on horses, often losing entire paychecks at the Santa Anita track. His biggest professional humiliation came in 1966, when he was publicly dropped from Gunsmoke after an altercation with a producer, reportedly involving a whiskey bottle, a gun prop, and threats of violence. Off-screen, Engel was no less dramatic. His marriage to chorus girl Helen Davis ended in scandal after tabloids revealed he had fathered a child with a married costume designer. That son would later sue him for unpaid support. Engel's health declined in the late 70s, partly due to heavy smoking and a refusal to treat his worsening blood pressure. He died of meningitis on December 29, 1980, in Burbank, California, at age 67, leaving behind a tangled estate that included back taxes, a modest condo, and a garage full of antique pistols. His net worth was estimated at $1 million, but most of it vanished in legal fees and medical debt. Thank you for watching as we reflected on the lives and legacies of the actors from the Virginian who are no longer with us. Their humor, charm, and unforgettable performances brought joy to millions and helped shape the show into a classic. While their journeys ended far too soon, their impact lives on through every scene, every laugh, and every memory they've left behind. As we honor their lives, we're reminded of how deeply television can touch our hearts. Join us next time as we look back at more stars who left us too soon, but whose stories continue to shine.